Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Downs Your Way podcast. We have a very special guest today. He kind of shouldn't need an introduction, but we'll give him one anyway, really. Without this guy, the RD band probably wouldn't be going anymore. What this manager does is everything from the ground up to the top and to the bottom again. Just an amazing guy. And as I say, kind of keeps it all going. He really does. Hello and welcome to Mr. Colin Speller. Hey, round of applause. You can unmute yourself.
I thought I'd come to the wrong interview then for a minute, to be honest. You were talking about somebody and I thought, oh, bloody hell, I've dialed into the wrong meeting. There'll be another face on here in a minute.
Somebody going,
Yeah, indeed.
So do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, Mr. Speller?
Oh, good Lord. Well, the potted history basically is I started with a university degree in agriculture back in the day and started life as an agricultural advisor. And I basically had a 40-year career working from an agricultural advisor in an organisation that went through commercialisation, privatisation, became a private business, and I ended up as managing director of it. And at the end, it was sold, and the new owners didn't want the management; they just wanted the operating business. So I found myself, retired in inverted commas. And that's when I started getting involved with this fun and games, really.
I'm really sorry.
Oh, well, these things happen. So I really just brought business expertise to it, no music expertise. I'm not, when you say I do everything, I should stress to everybody, I go nowhere near the stage other than to put water on it and carry equipment on and off. Basically, yeah, I thought, well, I can bring some business advice and a bit of, logic and process to this. I joined the Music Managers Forum because they offered training, which was absolutely splendid. And I'm sure we'll come back and talk about the value of that later. And when we set our little organisation up, we joined the Association of Independent Music, and that also offered training, which I took. So I put myself through training, even did a 2-day sound engineering course.
You did?
Only so that I could understand what all the arguments were about. I never had any ambition to get him. I just wanted to know, when there was all this squabbling going on, as was so often the case, I just wanted to know what the terminology meant. So I did an excellent place that I can thoroughly recommend down in Stroud. And I think, so I manage our business really. And I think one of the things, because I know this comes up from time to time in conversation with people, and I've seen it on social media, I am not a Mr. 20%. The original idea of music manager goes right back to the Beatles and Brian Epstein, and there were 4 Beatles and him, and he took 20%, a fifth of it. And that's kind of stuck, and it's still the sort of presumption that people have. So when they say manager, you assume you're going to have a trilby hat, a camel hair coat, and be snaffling at least 20% out of any money that passes back and forth between the band and anybody else. But no, I manage the business, and as you say, you just inevitably, we'll come on to this, I'm sure, later. Independent music business, you get dragged into every aspect of it. I've even tuned your guitar on stage. God help me.
You have indeed.
So that's me. That's how I got here. And if anybody's really having trouble getting to sleep at night, there is a long blog article about my 40-year career in ADAS, because believe it or not, it's quite an interesting corporate story for those who like such things. I'll put a link in the show notes. As I said, if you're having trouble getting to sleep at night, there's your solution.
A lot of people in that career and career path do read it, so don't put it down, Mr. Speller. So you've been, listening to all these podcasts because you've been helping edit them all and put them together, which is, I say helping, sort of basically doing it, which is, a heck of a job. So thank you again for that. But so you've been hearing all of this, probably over and over again as you edit them, everything that everyone's been sort of going on about on these podcasts. So, what are your observations on the music business? The music business, should we say the scene or shall we just say the music business in general? What should we
Well,
say?
I think this scene is probably
Okay,
relevant
this scene.
because one of the things I've noticed in going to things like the MMF Music Managers Forum events is that um, yeah, the music business seems to me to be a bit like the city of Brussels. They say that that's like three different cities occupying the same space, and I see that here because there's just so many layers of this. And I mean, I meet people who are in the rock side of music at MMF events with acts that we've never crossed paths with. I mean, it's
Mm,
bizarre. Anyway, that's a digression. Um, it's interesting, isn't it? It's challenging. It is fun, I should say, because as you've said before, quite a lot of these podcasts are sort of might seem a bit grumbly, but it is fun. That's why we do it. Um, I think, though, listening back to what other people have talked about and what the debate that goes on around this, one of the important things to get across is that what we're discussing is the creation and release of original music. Because
mm,
you talk about music, you could be talking about all sorts of things, and that's something else we'll come back to, maybe sort of the portfolio that someone might have. But you can be a musician for hire, you can be in a covers band, you can be in a tribute band, you can do all sorts of things. What we're trying to do, what you're trying to do, you and Steve are trying to create original music, and we're trying to release that, and that is an issue in its own right. I mean, I'm not saying the others haven't got issues. I think music generally is vastly oversupplied. um there are lots of people with skills which I would describe as sort of adequate or better. There's bands all over the place, really. I think once you're at a certain level of quality, that's often enough, particularly in the kind of environments that they play. um but I mean, crucial to our discussion really is this question of, can you make a go, in inverted commas, of creating and releasing original music?
mm. Yeah, that's probably it, to be honest, isn't it? I mean, like, so, what are the challenges as you see them then of like an artist, like, well, the artists that I've been speaking to are all, we're all
Sure.
what you're talking about, people that are writing, recording, and releasing original music that are in general not signed, that are independent. But even, I mean, like, I don't know, let's not go there as yet. Even signing deals doesn't make that any better a lot of the time. So what are the challenges? What are the challenges that you see?
Well, I think if you it was Han Solo in Star Wars who used to say, don't tell me the odds. And I think that is a reality here. You've got 11 million artists now, as measured by the streaming platforms. Um, there's 100 million songs on those streaming platforms, which is as good a estimate as we've got of the body of worldwide music.
Mm,
And you see all sorts of figures bandied about, but the most common one is that there's 100,000 new items going onto streaming platforms every day, which again is the best measure we've got of um, the music business as a whole. So you don't want to know the odds, do you? I mean, there's a vast number of acts. There's a vast amount of music out there already. Um, we talked about the streaming platforms. Digital is, probably the source of and solution to music's problems in a way. Um, it removed gatekeepers, because back in the
mm,
day, if you didn't have a label, if you didn't have someone to help you like that, you probably weren't going to get out there. So it's created a democracy where anyone can record and release. Um, the this You can get onto a digital platform with very little money, sort of 20 quid a year subscription, quid a
he,
year
he
subscription.
hasn't been
No, I
drinking,
haven't. Absolutely. Only
or
water.
has
Yeah.
he? I
Or have
don't
I? Yes. Is this a yes, we won't say. Anyway, um and of course, this software, the software's growing, isn't it? I mean, I'm talking to you on a MacBook computer that's got a sound audio editing package on it, which should I want to start warbling in my spare time, would be enough probably to mix it to a standard to put it on a DSP. So sorry, digital platform. So basically anybody can and does make music, it seems to me.
Mm,
So that's the first hurdle really, is that is a vast amount of it about. And of course, I don't think we should get into AI today in a big way, but we
probably not.
know. Well, I mean, here's a bit of cheerful news. I read an article the other day which Deezer, the French streaming platform, reckons they had 30,000 AI generated items went up. I think it was in the month of August. That's up from 20,000 in April.
Yeah, just a quick note on that because we're not going to go on it forever. But yeah, there are a lot of sites like you can just type in prompts like country song in E minor about my dog Ralph, and it will just come up with several options for that. And for a subscription, you can actually release that music as your own. I think probably what's going to happen, and my good friend Johnny Amos has kind of mentioned this as well, that I think there'll probably be like two tiers or many more tiers of streaming, where if you just want library music generated by AI, which is really what it is, it's library music, that'll be like one price. So cafes will have that or whatever. And then if you want to access like real artists, that'd be like the tier up. And I think that's probably where we're going to get to. And hopefully get to it quick because it sort of cuts it down, doesn't it, for us artists? It sort of, helps us out a little bit. So fingers crossed like it goes in that direction, really.
Well, whatever you do, don't go on the blues equivalent and look for a song about your dog, because it won't end well.
Never
Um,
does it?
Never
Never does,
does.
Colin.
Never
I'll tell
does.
you. No.
No. So, I mean, I think, against that background, the principal issue, and we've heard this from so many people really, and it's a terrible word, monetization. But basically, how do you make money out of this creation and release of original music?
Mm,
Um, the uh, when we started out, we made CDs, we sold CDs, and notwithstanding the not inconsiderable cost of creating an album, once you've actually got it and it's recorded, you can print CDs roughly a quid each, depending on how many you print. You could, yeah. So, if you're selling them for 10 to 15 quid, there's a fair markup on that. But the opportunity to actually play those is disappearing. I mean, there's no CD in the car, no CD player in the car. We've got one in the van, but I bet if we upgraded the van, that would disappear too.
mm.
Um, so people are, as we've heard from other artists, are willing to buy them as a sort of a memento of the gig, or in order to support the artist, but you haven't got that sort of need to buy it in order to play the
No.
music. Vinyl, everybody talks about, but it is niche. You've got a much higher upfront investment. You anywhere between £5 and £15 a disc, depending on how many you print. Maybe more actually than you can
Yeah.
go up to 20 quid if you're only printing a very small number. Um, I mean, no offense to the vinyl fans, for our point of view, they're difficult to store, transport. The shipping is at risk because they're much more fragile. But accept the fact that, I mean, we're doing vinyl for the new album, and we hope that will help generate some money to pay for the cost of the album.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, I do understand why people like vinyl, and we're not going to get into that, but it's like, but we do seriously thank all the vinyl buyers out there. And my God, they're a thing of beauty. I'm not being funny. They are a thing of beauty. They're just such a physical element. And I totally get why people buy them. And, thank you so much for doing so.
Yeah, indeed. And as I said, I'm sure we'll come on to talk later about the sort of options that artists have got for merch, but clearly that's one of them. Obviously, what's happened in the last 10 years, though, is that the sort of volume demands moved over to streaming. And by that, I mean not just, the dreaded Spotify, etc., but of course, more and more, and I see this particularly in my younger contacts, my children and others, is through, these Alexas and other similar devices where they just shout something at it and it starts playing music. The problem with that is that, bluntly, the payments are piss poor.
Mm.
I mean, there was a thing the other day on a national podcast saying that you needed over 500,000 streams a month to earn minimum wage. And that put
Yeah.
you, by the way, at the level of Alison Moyet. Now, to be fair, if you're getting 500,000 streams on Spotify, you're probably doing reasonably well on the other platforms as well, and it all adds up. That's on the plus side. On
That's
the
if they're not
minus,
bots.
well, yeah, it's genuine.
Okay.
We'll come back to bots later.
Mm.
But the problem is that the gross payment is soon eroded. You know, it depends how many fingers there are in the pie. I mean, we're quite lucky because the only fingers in the pie for us are you and Steve as songwriters who get a share of the streaming, and all the rest comes to our Mad Hat Records Limited. So, you know, one way and another, we get everything but the take from Spotify. Oh, and the take from the distributor, by the way, who
Mm.
takes a share of it. But it's still poor, and you still need vast quantities. And the other thing is that our sector, blues and rock, I mean, there's not a lot of recent data, but it's not, you know, people don't stream. The best data I could find was from 2020, where the top 100 blues artists garnered only 0.5% of all streams. I mean, you know,
Wow.
hip hop and things like that, you know, you're up to 30, 40% of all streams going down that route. So
Mm.
it really is challenging to see how you're going to get your money back. I mean, clearly in the past, you know, the traditional model was to create, release, and sell lots of physical music. You know, you sold vinyl, you sold CDs, you sold tape, you sold singles, didn't you? For crying out
Mm.
loud, you know. And again,
Picture
once
disc singles and all that kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. I mean, and I mean, as Stephen Stanley said in his interview, you know, music played a more significant role. I mean, the whole joy of buying an album, um, you know, and the currency of music in daily discourse. I mean, I was you know, basically a teenager in the late 60s and 70s, and I mean, you know, there's tremendous excitement, bands putting out new music, people rushing to the shops to buy them, etc. I mean, you know, in 1979, on the back of my first available sort of decent earnings, I went out and bought a full hi-fi system, you know, a turntable, an amp, a tuner, tape player, nice big huge pair of Mission speakers made in Huntingdon.
They were good quality.
They
Mission
were
speakers.
they were good
Wow.
quality. Sadly, they disintegrated. You know, the actual the membrane between the cone and the outside just sort of disintegrated, and that was the end of the line for them. But you know, many years later,
R.I.P.
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 R.I.P. the mission. But who does that now? You know, who
No.
makes buying a hi-fi a priority? You know, so that whole and you know, and to be honest, who sits and listens to music? You know, I in the, listened to a lot of music. When I worked, my predominant environment for music was the car and the CD.
Mm.
Now, I'm going to be honest, it's a streaming platform. Don't write in. Um, Live in a two-bedroom flat. I haven't got room for stacks of vinyl and stacks of CDs. We, through the business, for all sorts of reasons, need access to music of all sorts and types, and you know, listen to different things. You're a lecturer, you need to be able to just about, you know, refer to any track you possibly can. So yeah, it's an environment where streaming is the default. It's sort of like a black hole kind of drawing people in, and those
Mm.
opportunities for physical sales have largely vanished. I mean, um, you know, high physical sales meant higher revenue. You know, obviously the people from way back got all of those rights from the sales. You know, we know people who
Yes.
we've rubbed shoulders with some people of note, and I think of one in particular we used to bump into quite a bit at Mark's studio, who every Christmas would hear the ka-ching of as his song got played all over the again, and he'd be in Mark's studio spending it on yet more recording and
Mm.
what have you, bless him.
But
Uh,
those days are gone, aren't they? Really,
well,
those days are gone.
yeah, for volume. I mean, these days, you know, if you can do, I don't know, you know, 2, 3 thousand, maybe less sometimes, units, which is a combination of physical sales and blocks of streams in the first week of release, you can get into the album chart. And I
Mm.
mean, I'm not decrying anybody who's done that. Hats off to you for doing it. But I mean, it's not millions of sales. And then the following week, you probably need to do 400 plus to stay in the top 200. But you know, that gives you an indication again of the kind of scope, if you like, for
Mm.
the volume of music that's out
Because
there.
there is a lot of artists that, and again, we're not knocking anyone, but it's like they'll go all out to get that chart position. Like we'll release 4 or 5 different colored vinyls, and hopefully, like the super fans will like buy every one, etc., which kind of puts them into that chart position for the week. But it's at such a high cost because actually giving that outlay is, it's a huge outlay. But I understand the significance of it, but I just, it is
I think, yeah, the
not
point, I
gonna
mean,
you're not gonna get, return on investment probably for that.
probably not, but I mean, I suppose the point I was making again, compared to years ago, you know, the threshold to be crossed in that is a lot lower, and I think it just indicates, you know, the scope that there is generally for music. So you know, we've got artists turning to other options, and we've heard about them, you know, from the
Mm,
people you've interviewed. So there's touring, there's subscriptions, there's an increased merch range, people doing unique items, you know, handwritten lyrics, designs, you know, blah blah blah, and frequent releases. I mean, number one, the streaming platforms sort of feed on that. You know, if you stop
mm,
releasing for a period of time, you just basically stick where you were and then enter a gradual decline. If you don't kind of stimulate it by putting new music out there. But also, you know, people want to release frequently to remain visible and, you know, to try and maybe drag some revenue in. The question is, and Adam Norsworthy captured this brilliantly in my view, is how much appetite is for all of this, because
mm,
he described the music business as being two huge, if you like, hypermarkets, i.e., the big labels. And then next to it is a massive Middle Eastern style bazaar of market
mm,
stalls, thousands and thousands of us, all appealing to people to spend their money. And
mm,
I've already had feedback. We've just launched the album pre-sale. I've already had feedback from people saying, "Oh yeah, you know, I'd love to buy this, but there's a lot of you releasing at the moment, and I've got to squeeze my money across here." And I understand that. You know,
mm.
it's a challenge, but you know, these are the realities that people are facing. And you've said many times that we're not complaining. It's just what we're trying to do is to sort of illustrate to people. The whole purpose of this is to illustrate to people and raise a discussion about, you know, what it's like about there out there at the moment.
Well, yeah, because it is a different, it's very different. It continues to be, changing as well, and it will continue to change. The AI thing and lots of other issues as well. It will continue to grow and change. So it's an ever evolving issue. So we've talked about that a little bit. Well, we have a lot of people coming, sending emails, messages to the website, the social media. Come and play a gig down here. Come and play a gig down, which is lovely. Thank you so much, all of you, for that. Let's talk about touring. Let's get into it. Talk to me about touring, Colin.
Well, I mean, in theory, it has a potential to be, you know, a significant revenue stream. You know, you get lots of gigs. I mean, somebody told me the story the other day of somebody who, you know, got 650 in a hall at 35 quid a ticket on a place that costs 3.5 grand to rent. So, you know,
Mm.
do the maths again, you
I
know.
think that was a tribute, though.
There was a tribute, yeah, but I
Mm.
mean, it just, you know, if you could get to that, you know, suddenly it looks very viable. But you know, in the traditional models, you start locally, build your reputation, get a support or two, hopefully some club and festival gigs, you know, build to the point of being able to headline, and then grow the size of those headline gigs. And we saw bands, I mean, I guess we were sort of 2013, 2014, 2015 when we started this. We've seen bands doing this and growing to 100+ gigs a year. And pre-Brexit, quite a bit of that was Europe. Now, before everybody writes in, it's not impossible to go to Europe, but pre-Brexit, Europe was just an extension of this country because you chuck everything in a van and just go. Now you have to jump through certain hoops should you choose to do that. And I'm aware of one or two people who, haven't bothered and got away with it. But in theory, at least, it's much more difficult. But touring has a lot of practical challenges, really. And it varies from band to band. And I think, one of the things that people looking at original artists need to sort of look in behind how they operate to get a better understanding. I mean, I've said to you quite cynically, the simplest version for a touring original artist would be, well, you basically on your Todd with an acoustic guitar, Paul Simon, Homeward Bound style on a railway station, because you'd only got yourself to worry about. You could probably sleep in your car at times. It's if you move away from that, and I'm not, artistically, you want to be something different. For every move you make away from that, you are increasing your complexity because you've got more and more mouths to feed. Now, again, how do you do that? You can go for the all for one and one for all. And we've seen lots of people, we know people who go out, they take all the risks, they share all the risks, they share any reward. That has a advantage of being more flexible financially, but we know from experience, and I'm sure people recognize this, some of those acts can run into issues of creative differences, or somebody doesn't want to do it anymore, or what have you. The more controlled version maybe is where you have one or two principals and then you bring in the hired hands, but then they're expensive. So you've got a lot of cost associated with touring. However way you chop it up, it's either cash cost or it's opportunity cost. It's time, non-rewarded. Fuel, accommodation, it's long hours, it's often poor food. I mean, one of the things the MMF goes on about is, how to eat healthily on tour and how to look after yourself, etc., etc.
What? No Greggs?
Oh, I think they are. Yes. Well, we have chums on the circuit, don't we? Who we know sort of will tuck into a massive sort of kebab style takeaway most nights, and I think it's them they've probably got in their sights. Our occasional visits to Greg's, less so. But if we did it every day, yeah, fair point. And of course, now what you're up against, of course, is variable revenue. I mean, for a start, supports are usually low or no fee, most commonly no fee. Some you even have to buy on, and that's the great, I love this business at times. I mean, that's the great, don't mention the war sort of thing. A lot of big tours involve buy-ons.
Yeah.
We were once quoted £1,000, weren't we, to do a gig
Back in the day. And what was really quite interesting about that was you'd think for that, wouldn't you? We're talking £1,000 a gig, by the way,
a
not
gig, yeah, a
£1,000 for the
gig.
tour. So, but what was it? You probably think, oh, was that Wembley? No, darling, it was the Jam House in Birmingham and venues like that. I'm not putting the Jam House down. It's a lovely venue, but I'm not going to pay £1,000 to play there. And I think what is interesting, though, about that situation at the time was a lot of people around the band were going, do it, you've got to do it, you've got to do it, get the money. And me, you, and Steve sort of went, no, we're not.
No, well, we won't mention who the headline artist was.
We won't mention, it was probably not their call anyway.
No,
It was
no, no,
probably the
no, no.
managers slash, they were just
Well,
trying to make their tour kind of viable, I think. So,
yes, well, indeed, and I don't think they did ever get anybody, but it was interesting, and I mean, yes, obviously that so you can go out and do those, but you're incurring cost and probably just relying on merch sales to cover it, which it can often be a tough call.
yeah.
Headline gigs, obviously initially low fee, understandably the promoter will set the ticket prices reasonably low. they don't want to take risk, etc., etc. And often the so-called door share is often common, where you
Mm.
basically agree proportions of the door take depending on the size of the audience. And usually the case is the bigger the audience, that that extra money basically flows to the artist. But the initial split is all about covering the venue costs, which is kind of fair enough. But so if you only get 20 people turn up, the chances
Mm.
are the artist is going to go away with nothing. I mean, a fag packet figure, if you want to know, guys and girls, is, if you've got 100 people paying 15 quid each, and I mean that's net of ticket fees, etc., that is probably going to see the band getting just about into four figures with a fee, depending on the structure and what deal
So
they've.
£1,000. If you think, remember, like if it's not a one for all and all for one, then there'll be a lot of payment, fees to the musicians through that. There's the fuel, there's the food costs. Like if normally, say if a gig isn't on your doorstep, which it very rarely is, that's kind of like it's longer than an 8 hour day.
Well, and I think that's the thing that strikes you about I've often jokingly said, the one thing they don't teach you on any courses about music that I've done is the skill of waiting. You spend a
Yeah.
lot of time or
Lot of waiting.
waiting or sitting in transports. But I mean, but you can see a route by which you can, in theory, grow this. You get bigger gigs, bigger fees, but they come with more costs. The tendency is, as you go up the line, the more is expected of you. People are less forgiving of technical issues, of sound quality, etc. So by and large, you're quite quickly into the situation where you're taking your own sound engineer. The band probably start to think that if they're playing in front of 500 people, they shouldn't be humping their own gear through the door. So you've got roadies involved, and then maybe techs, and to set up and so it soon grows
Mm,
in the cost goes up. You're basically paying people more, and then you're paying more people. So it's quite interesting to sort of look at the economics, and whilst progress is great and encouraging, it does come with a lot more sort of on cost. And then the other question that comes back, if you go back to the pre-COVID era and our chums who were doing 100+ gigs a year, is what is the current audience appetite for frequent gigs, particularly at high prices? Apparently, from what everybody said, not great.
Unless you Taylor Swift or something, and then we're talking really, really high
Oh,
prices.
yeah, I mean, we're discussing the sort of the so-called
Yeah,
grassroots sector here. I think once that's a different world. I mean, I meet these guys at the MMF, and they're
yeah.
lovely people. The people who, not Taylor Swift's manager, but people managing big acts.
Mm.
And they're sitting there sort of scratching their heads. I mean, I always joke about it. I say to you, the sort of questioning is, oh, we've got to get all this cash out of Germany. How do we do it? And you think, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. And I mean, it's genuine. You can see that they're not just
Mm,
bullshitting. They are, but it's a different world. It's a totally different world. And I think we're talking about, the much more hands-on sector. So
mm,
it's kind of, yeah, it's challenging all round. And I think I come from a background where towards the end of the life of our business, when we were fighting for its survival and having to put it through a process, read the blog, of how to save it,
mm,
we were paying some people for advice that we were duty bound to take from them so that we could show we'd had proper advice. We were paying some people £600 an hour for advice.
mm,
And yeah, we'll come on to don't put your daughter on the stage, blah blah blah. It when you see the skills that those people had and the experience and the ability to put their name to something which underpinned what we were doing, you could kind of see why they were there. But then I see people who have got the most amazing music skill as
mm,
players, as creators, as performers, you know, we're bloody lucky to get that in a week, some of them.
Mm.
So, it's a very different world. I mean, I don't, point of order, Mr. Chairman, if anyone runs away with the wrong idea, I didn't get paid £600 an hour. I mean, I got a good salary for what I did, but I'm not one of these sort of ex-millionaire CEOs at all. That again was a different world. But you look at that contrast. I I've come from a background where I've seen, as I said, very skilled people, very at the top of their game, and their
Yeah.
capacity to earn money is vastly greater than what I've seen thus far. Taylor Swift accepted in the music business.
Mm. So, like, you know, where does that all go? I mean, so what can an artist do really, to kind of counteract that?
Well, I mean, I think when we look back, and we've talked about this a bit, did we do this right? Did we do it? One of the things that we should have done at the outset, I think, and I don't think any of us had the capacity to do this in terms of our experience or the people around us or what have you. But now, if you'd come to me now sort of going into this, my first question would be, and it's a boring business one, this we used to do this, my
Mm.
previous life, vision, the classic, where do you want to be in 5 years time, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
Because as I said at the outset, there's so many different options here, and not all of them, you can get kind of swept into this and sort of end up in not all of them appeal.
Mm.
So do you want to tour and perform on stage? Is that really what you want to do? Because that's
Or
a
how
life.
often, how
Well, yeah,
often do you want to
exactly.
do
I
it?
mean, do you want, Chantel, bless her, do you want
Mm.
to do 28 gigs in 31 days or whatever? I mean,
God bless you, Chantal.
I, it's a question. I'm not saying
Mm.
there's anything wrong with what she did, what she's doing, but that's a
For
lot.
yeah, for
I
everyone, that wouldn't be something they'd want to do. They
want to
might want to
do.
do
No.
half that or whatever.
Can you see yourself becoming a hired musician? We know a lot of people who make, a very good way in the world playing for other people.
Yeah.
Top dollar people. You work with some of them at BIM in Birmingham.
Mm.
That's what they do. They go out, they get paid good money, excuse me, per day, per gig, and that's a vision for you. Do you want to play do you just want to play and perform on stage? In which case, covers band, tribute band. If you find the right tribute niche, I mean, I'll never forget, we did a support gig in Sheffield, and to get to it was one of these multiple, I can't remember which one it was now, but it had more than one arena. And to get to the one you were performing in as a support, we had to walk through the crowd, the 1,000 head crowd assembling for the Smiths with a Y. So,
Mm.
if you can find your niche, maybe prepare to wear a funny wig and behave like, I don't know, David Bowie or whomsoever, great. It's music. You're making a living. I mean, see lots of those. There's quite a big circuit for decent tributes. But if it's writing and releasing original music, and we're perhaps in our next discussion we have get more into why you do this. But if
Mm.
I know that that's what you want to do, um, then we're back to the challenges we've talked about. So what's your
Mm.
objective? Is it art? Is it necessity? Do you have to do it? Do you want to create art? Do you want to create a legacy? Do you want to do all of the above? And if the answer to that, yeah, I want to create release original music, then okay, somebody who's close to you described himself to me in his former role as a teacher as, a quotes, a killer of dreams. He said he was, because he told reality to your to the students that you both teach. And I don't want to be like that, but I know they say, well, okay, you've got to be realistic. You've got to set budgets. You've got to put some limits in place. You've got to avoid those clarion calls to spend more money or go over here or do this. You've got to think, well, why am I doing that? What am I going to get out of it? And be quite ruthless about that, ruthlessly
Because
skeptical about it, because you're not always going to get a return on that, and it's very difficult. I mean, I saw a band talking about they'd done a support with a huge act in the UK, and they were offered the chance to go to Europe, and they had to say no because they had to sit down and they worked out it was going to cost them so much money, it was going to blow them off course. And even if it increased their profile, it could sort of blow them off course altogether. So you've got to be able to
Mm.
do that. You can't get swept along with this, yeah, go here, go here, go here, because that might not be the right thing to do. And I think overall, try and develop a methodology that suits you, that you can afford, and it keeps you going. Um, Draw on your successes, to kind of top that up, be able to weather a few storms, be able to take a bit of risk and it not play off. Um, and overall, an important thing, and there's lots of attention to this right across the industry. Give some regard to you managing your mental health. Don't let it get you down. Really, that's easier said than done. But it's a factor again. You've got to sort of, as I said at the outset, kind of realize that maybe this constantly putting yourself out there, putting your work out there, having it appraised by other people implicitly or explicitly, it may have a toll on you, and you've got to have a certain inner robustness in order to deal with that.
I mean, the impact, I think, on mental health of artists is huge. But I'm also really aware of the fact that, oh, I don't know how to say this without coming across, I don't want to upset anyone, but I do feel that sometimes as musicians and artists, we get a rite of passage to sort of parade that a little bit or like moan about it a bit more. And I always look at, somebody working in Tesco, or, I mean, Tesco is a good store, don't get me wrong, I like a Tesco, but or somebody as a dentist, or like, they don't seem to get the same kind of rights. Like, so I think, oh, it's a troublesome one for me, but the kind of the drain of social media on an artist is quite a lot. So I do understand why sometimes artists speak about mental health more online than maybe a dentist or somebody like that, or somebody in that kind of field. And it's really important for younger artists as well, because as you were saying, you kind of get sucked into, you're on a treadmill all the time and you have to produce content. And content can just be a post. I'm not talking about, loads of content, but you do feel, and I feel, and I think I've said this before, that if you're not posting a lot, that people will forget you. But then you kind of worry that if you post too much, people are going to get fed up. So it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. But
Well, I think an observation I would make is that, again, comparing this life with a previous one, is that I, yeah, I think it's hugely challenging. I think that the input that you get, particularly from social media, from the visibility you have, the things that people say, the things they don't say, the reactions to things. I think that's a drip drip, and there have been lots of stuff. I mean, digital burnout is a subject that the MMF has covered.
mm,
The need to keep promoting yourself, um, can lead to, yeah, what they call digital burnout. And we've seen people, haven't we, who've given up and actually said, we can cope with the music, we can cope with this, blah blah blah. We just haven't got the time or the energy to keep pumping stuff out every 5 minutes.
mm,
And that's the problem, because you do have to push, 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 don't you?
mm. Although
And
Mr. Eid was kind of like saying, because he works for an artist that doesn't necessarily do that. But I think that's kind of an anomaly. I mean, it may not be. Please tell us if it's not. But all the bands and artists that I've worked with, as a lecturer, um, it does feel like, the feedback is, you slip down very quickly in your
well, it's hard
reach.
yards. It's hard
Yeah.
yards. And I think that's again, if you go back to where I've worked before, if you spent money on advertising and promotion, you'd expect an actual cash return on it. With music, you don't necessarily get that. You'll get a return, something will happen, something will grow, but you're not going necessarily going to get the money back. And it's also a little bit like, um, it's like my aged mountain bike. You've got to pedal that on anything other than a steep downhill. So
Mm.
even you've got to pedal it all the time. You stop pedaling it, it stops. And even if it's on a slight downhill, it'll stop. And it's like this with promotion. If you're not push, push, push all the time, um, and yet, you quoted in your last email, and you've just had another example of it this week of people who, lots of examples from other artists, and you've just had another one today where, something that you've pushed very hard has not landed with people that it should have landed with, and
Mm.
therefore I'm sure people out there in social media land think, oh, why are they banging on about this again, and why can I keep getting an advert, keep appearing? It's because that's the only way you can get noticed, well, get your message out. um
It's
you
just got
know
to be repetition, because it's, you know, the time that you log on Facebook is, you'll miss it, or something else will come on, or you're scrolling too quickly and it will go past. And a lot of the time, it's maybe, I don't know, the fifth time that we post something, somebody might see that, um, which is not their fault. It's not our fault. It's just life, and it's just kind of, that's the way it is. So, we do try and post not too much. One, because, you know, that would probably be a full-time job, creating content, like, on a totally regular basis. And I'm just also sort of kind of, yeah, scared of sending too much out, in case people are like, oh my God, not her again, and I'm sure some people think that anyway, but just scroll past, darlings. You don't have to say it, all right?
oh
Mental
no
health, please give us a, please, please.
well, you have to, yeah, I mean, it is a treadmill. um And of course, it leads to an atmosphere of hype, doesn't it? I mean, everybody's pushing themselves, everybody's trumpeting their successes. It always reminds me of that, the slot machine in the pub, which is absolutely silent when it's taking your money and banging away noisily when it's paying it out. And I think, there's a lot of that in the game of people. Hype has been endemic in the business way, way back.
Mm.
Lots of stories of people who broke through simply on the back of some hype. So yeah, that's why people do it. But it's going back to talking to someone starting out. That my advice is not to get seduced by that, and don't let it get you down. Because you're it is relentless. It's in your face all the time.
Yeah, and as you say, it's like a 24/7 thing, and doesn't matter if you're on holiday or whatever it is, you can't not engage. I mean, you can, I guess, just log off, but if it's so important to you, and getting the music out is so important to you, it's very hard to do that. Maybe
It,
you should now and again, like log off for a week or something. I've never achieved that, and I salute anyone that has.
well,
So,
yeah, I mean, I think there is this the feeling around what I would describe as a permanent feeling of having left the gas on,
yeah.
which is like, I'm not doing anything. You and I sitting here now talking. Is this gonna, so, should we be knocking out a bit of different content or what have you? You've always got to go to bed tonight, and there was stuff undone. There's stuff that
Mm.
should have been done that won't be done. It's just the way it is. And of course, music, again, hype, and it's also fascinated by numbers, and that doesn't help, because however hard people try, they measure everything through numbers. How many monthly listeners you've got on Spotify, how many followers on Facebook, how many
And they
followers on
don't
Instagram.
necessarily interrogate that data. Again, why should they? I'm not saying they should, but I'm just saying that that flat line number is a lot of the time not the whole picture. So, I mean, there's loads of, places you can go on, socialblade.com, but again, you've got to know what you're looking for to, like, see if those are real figures, see if they're bought followers, see if they're bought. But you've got to know what you're looking for. So it's like if you're a festival promoter and you're looking and you just go on somebody's Spotify and social media and see the figures and just go, oh, great, or, whatever, they'll bring some people in. That is not necessarily the case. You've got to delve further, basically. The figures don't tell the whole story.
No, they don't. I mean, the real value's in real, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's real bodies, real warm bodies coming to your gigs, real people buying the merchandise, real people having a relationship with you. We've had people talk about the build of community, and that's important in this. And you're you're trying to develop that contact. I mean, I saw, um, I think it was Els Bailey the other day on that line appealing for people to sign up to the email list because of the frustrations of trying to get to them through Facebook. I mean, Facebook is now predominantly Meta, it's now a commercial platform. You
Mm,
can put stuff up there, you'll get a little bit of a response, but I mean, you're really not going to get what have you got, 10,000 followers on Facebook? You'll be lucky to get 100 reactions to something, and that's pretty good, really. Unless you promote it, or unless it's really drastic, like I've broken my leg in 3 places or something. Maybe
mm.
but you've
Are
got to
you
put.
telling me I've got to break my leg in 3 places to launch this
We'll
album?
come on to alternative strategies later, but
Oh,
but yeah, I mean, basically that's it's trying to keep it real, and that is a challenge because there's a lot of froth out there, and yeah, the demands are tough. The demands for content, the demands for presence, the demands to respond, because obviously if you put stuff out there, then people respond to it. You need to respond to them. It's hugely challenging. So I take my hat off to anybody doing it. I fully understand when people just put up the white flag and say, oh, I'm out of here because I can't cope with that kind of stuff. The the chances of virality, if you like, if that's the right word, of going viral are fairly slim. You're just as likely to do that for your content. You're probably more likely to do it for your content and your music, to be honest, most of the time.
mm,
And I'm not saying you, I mean artists
yeah.
generally. Cement your head in a microwave and have the fire brigade come and have to cut you out. You'll
Ah, they
probably
were
go,
from Wolverhampton as
Hampton.
well, who did that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yes, what I mean. So
Oh,
you missed an
come
opportunity
on.
there.
I know.
Do that. Yeah,
Beat me
but
to
but
it.
then will that bring any more people to gigs? Will that cause any more people to stream or buy the music? Probably not. And that again is another issue with this world in which we live, is that there's all this focus on uh, going out through those channels. Question is, does it does it deliver? Recent paper that I read the other day suggests not.
No, it's just that I've always, been sort of skeptical about it, but the read across between, I don't know, making yourself, um, it's all about you as your personality or you as what you like, or, separate to the music, and the read across from that. I've always been skeptical that read across is probably a lot less than people were talking about, and now the figures are out that actually kind of suggest that that was right. I do think you've got to bring everything back to the music. I think it's interesting. I often put on a little video of Ralph with one of our songs in the background, but to be honest with you, that's me just playing about. I'm just having a bit of fun there, to be honest. And as everyone knows, I love my dog Ralph, so you know. I'm just, if I'm going to put anyone's music in the background, I might as well put mine.
Well, it doesn't seem much point, releasing it if you're not going to use it in that environment. And
And Ralph, to be fair to him, he says that he's written most of it. So
he certainly claims an assist anyway, because
yeah,
I keep finding his paws all over the various registrations for the performing rights and all of that.
it's
And he's added himself, and I've had to take him back out again. But
yeah, it's
that's
becoming
an
a
ongoing
thing. But
ongoing battle.
I mean, we'll talk about it. When I sort of, you interview me when we flip side this up. But he's a very important part of keeping my mental health on the straight and narrow. He really is, very, little pet friends are just the best. They really are. So, I mean, promotion, I mean, I know, we're talking about promotion, but there's so much that can be spent, isn't there? And you mentioned Els Bailey and her post about not the Facebook algorithm not reaching its potential, and the the amount of money that an artist can spend. I mean, on even small advertising, and we do a tiny bit of it, but we only do it to a certain level because it's my God, it ends up costing so much money. I think people must think advertising on Facebook's like 10 pence or whatever. It's really not. It's really not, is it, Colin?
It's not, but it is effective, and I think
Mm,
one of the things that, again, going back to digital as the sort of cause, often solution to all life's problems, I mean, it does give you that option, um, to do it, and it's become simpler to do, and less of an art, more of a science, which is great. I mean, the expensive stuff is in the traditional routes, isn't it? It's in um, paying other people, basically going, paying to go on support tours, paying people to, I don't know, film complex videos I mean, again, I don't knock anybody who does that, but you can soon see. We've heard stories, we've all heard them, I'm sure, but I've certainly heard them since I got involved in this, of six-figure sums being spent by people to kind of try and develop as launch acts, so third
mm.
parties spending it, or people kind of spending that themselves. And it's very, very easy to see how you could do that.
And
Very
by the
easy.
way, can I just clarify for people listening, that's artists in this field. We're not talking
Yes.
about the Taylor Swift. We're still talking about, by the way, artists in the rock and blues genre and grassroots genre that we're
Yeah, I mean,
in.
and I think what I'm saying is that it's whether you specifically point to someone who's done it or not, it's very easy to see how you could do it if you went the
Mm,
whole hog. If you paid for top-notch musicians on your recording, you have top-notch studios to record in, top-notch producers, blah blah blah. You can soon rack up very significant sums of money to invest in the music, very significant sums of money to promote it. And if it, yeah, I mean, it will do better. Question some of the earlier stuff really about who's playing and mixing it, etc. But once you get it out there and start promoting it, it will do better than something that's not promoted. There's no question
mm,
about that. But it won't be your sort of traditional, business school standards of, we spend £1 on advertising, how much do we get back? It's really trying to push something up a slope, notch at a time, and how much money does it cost to get to the next level.
mm.
So I think you have to, um and I think, yeah, if you've not got money, then time comes into play, because that's what you see people doing, is they'll put more time and more resources into, and DIY content and all that sort of stuff, because they maybe haven't got the money to pay other people.
Absolutely. So what would be, given all that, what would be your advice to like new starting out artists and bands on this scene?
I mean, Sari Shaw captured it nicely, didn't she, when she said,
She
about the
did.
skilled son of a friend, if there's anything else you can do. Because she's right in a way, because that kid could still play the guitar. That kid could still go out and perform. At
Mm,
some future point, they could start a music career. Maybe when they've made their fortune, they've got to the level of a partner in a professional services firm earning 600 quid an hour, they can then sort of give all that up and go to music. So that's the first group, because you do it, because she said you do it because you have to. And it's not, I would say, don't do it if you just want to get famous. Go and cement your head in a microwave, if you want to get famous in the
go
modern
on a
way.
reality show.
Go on a
Like,
reality show. Go, find some content, become a TikToker. I mean, I'm not being skeptical about those. My son works in social media marketing with some people who are, very famous and make a lot of money out of it for the work they do for brands. So, there are other routes you can follow, but only do it. Um, as I said earlier, decide what you want to be.
Mm,
Where, ultimately, do you just want to go out and perform? Do you want to write and release, or a combination of both? And I think, take good advice, get some training. That's important. Good places you teach at some. Paul Long made that point about training. It's extremely useful. Um, you know, you might go viral, but don't count on it. Have a plan. Uh, have a portfolio of things to do. Um, look to make a go of music, but don't necessarily wait around for it just to happen.
absolutely. Absolutely. So what about us then? Like coming back to us, do you want to say a little bit about kind of how you manage us and how we kind of work?
I think, I mean, our big issue is we don't have very deep pockets, and yet you want to keep going, and I support that. You want to write and release original music. Um, so yeah, I mean, a big part of what I have to do is find a methodology to allow us to do that within our means.
Mm,
Um, we're releasing a new album. We've done a lot of the work on that ourselves. We've the aim is to get the best quality product out there at the optimum cost,
mm,
and that's really what we want to do. I mean, the ultimate aim is a repertoire that you can be proud of, and a legacy that repertoire and a legacy that you can be proud of. Really what Mark Eade said. Make music because you want to make music, do it well. Um, and when you get to his
mm.
age, you've got something to be proud of. And so my job is really trying to make sure that we can husband our resources, to return to my agricultural roots, to make that happen.
Yeah, it's yeah, kind of it's just finding your own way, and I think for that would be good advice for artists. Just find your own way of kind of managing what you do. You want to, if writing and releasing music makes you happy, then just try to find a way that fits your pocket and fits your mental health capacity and try and work within that really, because that's kind of what it's all about, really. Um, so what are the highs and the lows of the journey so far? I kind of didn't really want to ask that, but I'm going to ask it.
Oh well,
Don't
uh,
talk about the lows too much. Let's yeah, just
no, I mean, it's been great fun. You've gigged in some amazing places. We've
we
we've
have.
met some interesting and amazing people. Um, it's great to be part of a team, and with great people. I think the sort of low side of it really is, it's taxing, to what you're trying to do for all the reasons we've explained. It's challenging, and it's taxing. So, we've seen people come and go because they've had their frustrations with it, which we understand. We're still going. I look forward to more good times ahead. And I think, I love your music. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't love the music. I don't uh, I have particular musical tastes. I love what you do, and I want to help you create that repertoire and that legacy to be proud of. So, um, yeah, it's great fun. I've enjoyed myself. I've learned
Hmm.
new skills. I've discovered skills I didn't know I had, like how to pack a van, how to put more gear into a van than it seems likely to ever fit. Um, I've always enjoyed driving, fortunately. So I started life as a tractor driver, so I'm used to spending hours behind the wheel in a reasonably uncomfortable conditions. That's come in handy. No, I just think we've got to continue to enjoy it. And as I said, we've got to find a way of doing it that keeps it sustainable. sustains us both financially and in terms of morale,
Mm.
and still create something that you're proud of.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, you sort of skirted over the lows, and it's I appreciate that. To be honest, I appreciate that. Um, so final thoughts then. What are your final thoughts to sum all this up? Really?
I just I think it's, I hope what the podcasts are bringing home to people, and it's not just about us, it's about everybody out there who's trying to do this, is, just how tough it is for them. And as I'm sure we'll come on and talk about next week, if this is in your DNA, if this is what you want to do, then it's a tough gig, to be sure. And I think that, and it's changing all the time. It's
Mm,
absolutely changing all the time. I think it's probably changed as much in the 10 years that we've been doing it, as it probably did in the previous sort of 20 or 30, really. And it's absolutely changing all the time. You've got
mm,
AI and new technologies coming in, and the consumption of music's changing, etc., etc. So if music's your art, if original music's your thing, you are operating in an extraordinarily challenging environment. And
yeah.
I think everybody that supports what you do in whatever way, I take my hat off to. Those
Mm,
of us who work with you to try and help you deliver this, hat tip to all of us, but also all of those people out there who buy the music, come to the gigs, stream it, talk about it to their friends, annoy their friends by buying them CDs for Christmas. Hint, hint. All of that, just hats off to the lot of you, because it's what keeps you going. And as I said, it comes back to, and we'll talk about it more, I'm sure, in the
mm,
future, how much of this is a drive from within.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and and everything that you do for the band. As I say, it's kind of immeasurable, to be honest. So
Well,
we thank you.
I enjoy it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. And well, thank you for having me on board. And it's been fun. And I look forward to asking you the questions next time.
Eek. Thank you so much again. Hi, everyone. So you've heard from Colin this week. Hope you've enjoyed that. And next week, it's going to be me in the spotlight to answer some questions. So I hope you hang around for that. I think that's probably going to be the last one of this series. So we hope you've enjoyed it. And yeah, I'll be interested to see what questions Colin has for me. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. See you next week.
These days, these days, these days.